Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by Fume. There's more than one way to drop a bad habit, folks. Sure, cold turkey is one of them, if you're into torturing yourself, but there is a better way. It's called Fume, spelled F-U-M, and it's designed to help you replace your bad habit with a harmless one. It uses no vapor, no electronics, no chemicals, only natural, delicious flavors packed into an award-winning device designed to help you succeed. Start the holidays off right with the good habit by going to tryfume.com/chilling and get the journey pack today. Fume is giving listeners of the show 10% off when they use my code CHILLING to help make starting the good habit that much easier. This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by BetterHelp. So, what do the holidays mean to you? Do you ever feel like it's the season of giving and giving and giving and never receiving much in return? It's time you gave something to yourself, folks. A little R&R, a break from all the stress, and a dedicated therapist from our friends at BetterHelp. Therapy empowers you to become the best version of yourself that you can be. And with BetterHelp's brand of remote therapy, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. In the season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/chilling today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/chilling. It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
Good evening, listener. You're listening to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. On tonight's edition, we invite you to leave behind your safe reality and descend with us into the frightening depths of the most terrifying imaginations with 2 audio adaptations of frightening fiction about devastating dinners and isolating incidents. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, and tonight I'll be your guide as we traverse the dimly lit corridors of your darkest dreams. Stay tuned after the second story for a big Chilling Tales for Dark Nights podcast announcement. Joining us tonight to help bring to life the frightening fiction of Kitty Olsen and Kyle Harrison are voice talents Nick Goroff, Kyle Stroud, Justine Anastasia, myself, Steve Taylor, Paul J. McSorley, Olivia Steele, Michelle Kane, Jonathan West, Danielle Hewitt, and Savvy Hewitt. Now, get your ticket ready, take your seat in our theater of the minds, and brace yourself. It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Our first tale this evening is written by Kitty Olsen and is performed by Nick Goroff, Kyle Stroud, Justine Anastasia, myself, Steve Taylor, Paul J. McSorley, Olivia Steele, Michelle Kane, Danielle Hewitt, and Savvy Hewitt. In it, we meet a large family gathering together for the holidays, much like the one I'm attending now. Not so exciting, right? Well, the fun begins when people realize one of these family members just doesn't belong. Hang on a minute, folks. I'm so sorry. What's that? The lady over there. How the hell should I know? I thought she came with you, and why is she eyeing my wife's silver cutlery? But if you didn't bring her, and I didn't bring her... Oh boy. Now, without further ado, I present to you Christmas with the Family.
I don't hate Christmas. I really don't. What I do hate are family get-togethers that are so big, there's no way you could possibly know all of their names. That happens on Christmas. Well, it was the weekend before Christmas. This year, my in-laws decided to rent out a cozy lodge for us to all stay together as a family. Which meant I had a whole weekend of no escape from anyone. My wife Alicia said I was just being a Scrooge. That is not the case. Like I said, I don't hate Christmas. But as much as I genuinely love my wife, that affection does not travel to her family.
Hey Greg, what's got you looking like you sucked on a lemon? Too much booze in that mule?
My safe place in the kitchen corner had been invaded. My wife's brother-in-law, mine too, I suppose, Matthew, had sidled up to me with his own copper mug. He clinked it against mine and grinned.
Come on, man, it's Christmas. Turn that frown upside down.
He elbowed me a few times in the ribs, and I considered walking out into the blizzard outside, letting nature decide my fate. I'm fine, Matthew. Don't you have a wife to be hanging out with? I put extra emphasis on that word for a reason. Matthew, to his credit, only tensed for a second before brushing it off.
I get to see Tracy every day. I don't get to see my family all too often.
I gave him a pretty solid stare, which causes good cheer to wilt a bit. Without another word, I stalked off. Or I would have if I hadn't been intercepted by a pint-sized kiddo who lived in my house, but quite insistently did not call me Dad.
Greg, Vincent stole Brooke's doll, and he's not giving it back.
For God's sake. I glanced back at Matthew and knew he'd be no help. So I let my stepdaughter, London, guide me to the playroom. Brooke was my child, biologically speaking, and the sound of her sobbing nearly broke my heart. They did nothing for the thief, who swung the doll around by its hair and laughed. The urge to smack that kid was real, but instead, I just approached Vincent and cleared my throat. Vincent, did you take that doll from Brooke? Vincent looked up without a care in the world and shrugged.
So?
I responded by pulling the doll away from Vincent and handing it back to my daughter, whose tears slowed but didn't fully stop. Vincent scowled and proceeded to stomp on my foot. It didn't hurt that much. He was just 7. But it did sting as the little boy stormed out of the room, slamming the playroom door behind him and proceeding to scream and cry like he'd been the victim of a murder.
He pushes me and took Dolly.
Oh, it's okay. I knelt down to my toddler's level and pulled her into my arms. You're okay. London reappeared out of nowhere and dabbed at Brooke's cheeks with a tissue.
Vincent's very naughty, bro. And it's almost Christmas, so you know what that means?
London grinned quite maliciously.
Santa's gonna steal him and eat him.
The casual mention of the child eating at least got Brooke to stop crying. I sighed and shook my head. London, that's not what Santa does. Santa gives coal to the bad kids. He doesn't eat them. London didn't pay me any mind and continued to mime, eating a non-existent child. Exaggerated fake cannibalism was apparently hilarious to 3-year-olds as Brooke giggled non-stop. Tears forgotten. Crisis handled. I left the playroom, quite proud of London, calming down her little sister like that, even if it was a touch morbid. Meanwhile, Vincent was still throwing his fit at his mom and dad. His mother Diana gave me the dirtiest look, but for once didn't come over to give me a tongue-lashing about watching my own kid. And how dare I be mean to her perfect little do-no-wrong angel. I could not wait to go home. I made my way over to the fireplace, which was thankfully not too busy. The lodge was quite a cozy temperature, and too close to the flames was almost overwhelming with heat. But it was the best way to guarantee I'd be left alone.
Well, hello, Greg.
Or not. I glanced up to see. Definitely one of the uncles, but I couldn't tell which off the bat. There are like 10 of them. You can excuse me for not recognizing everyone so quickly. He was tall, wearing a red flannel and a short salt and pepper gray beard. He looked down at me, and he really had to look down. He was freaking huge, and smiled kindly.
You all right there, son?
I blanked. I blanked hard on this guy's name. And it was obvious, judging by how he chuckled.
Uncle Nick. I understand. I get this family all mixed up too sometimes. And I've been around for more Christmases than you.
Right. Uncle Nick. I still didn't remember him, but I wasn't gonna admit that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to be a jerk. I downed the rest of my Moscow Mule and half smiled up at him. I'm already a bit tired.
I understand that, too.
Uncle Nick patted my shoulder with a hand that was comparable to a pie plate in size.
Have a seat near the fireplace. I'll top off your drink.
That sounds great. Uncle Nick vanished into the kitchen and returned with a topped-off mug. I raised my drink to the older man and took a long sip.
So, the Christmas season has you feeling a bit down, Greg?
Uncle Nick asked after I'd swallowed. I nodded. I couldn't help myself. I was so tired. It's not Christmas in itself per se. It's, well...
Family?
I nodded. You get the same vibe?
Oh, I do indeed.
Uncle Nick sighed as he took his seat next to me.
Lots of Christmas festiveness, with the decoration and the music, but very little Christmas spirit.
Tell me about it. The new drink had loosened up my lips, and Uncle Nick seemed more than willing to hear me vent a little. So, I vented. My mother-in-law's already almost through her second bottle of wine. I had to stop Vincent from stealing my daughter's doll. I'm gonna hear about that from Cassie later, because her kid can do no wrong. Matthew's probably sneaking off to snog with Diana. Poor Tracy, for putting up with that. I trailed off as my eyes landed on my father-in-law across the room with one of his other granddaughters on his lap, and I shivered.
Something wrong?
It's probably nothing. My wife says I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. I gestured towards Jerry's general direction with my mug. Something about my father-in-law with little girls makes me uncomfortable. I don't let Brooke or London get too close. I'm probably overthinking it and being the creepy one. But those are my kids. I can't make myself comfortable enough leaving them alone with Grandpa. You know? Wow. I talked a lot. I practically downed the rest of my mule in a single drink. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk your ear off.
Ah, don't worry about it, my boy.
Uncle Nick reached into his chest pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in candy cane paper.
You've been very helpful to me tonight. You're a good man. I wish your in-laws were nearly as good. Here, I'd like you to have this.
Oh. The White Elephant exchange is tomorrow night. I held up my hand to decline.
This isn't for the White Elephant, Greg. It's for you.
He pressed it into my hand.
Merry Christmas.
I laughed awkwardly, but I pulled the ribbon off the package and tore away that festive wrapping. Inside, I couldn't believe it. It was an Apple Watch. I'd been eyeing the exact one for weeks, but decided I wouldn't be able to get it this year. Next year, maybe. After a holiday bonus? I couldn't accept it. I knew how pricey it was. Uncle Nick, I looked up from the watch to see I was now alone at the fireplace. The only sign that Uncle Nick had been there at all was the copper mug he had also been drinking out of, although now that it was resting on the hearth, I could see a milky white froth left on the rim. Perhaps Uncle Nick had been mixing himself a White Russian rather than a Moscow Mule. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that I had to track down the old man and give him back this far too expensive gift. Even if it had been exactly what I wanted for Christmas, it was just too much. I weaved my way through the family crowd and managed to catch up to my wife. Bless her heart. Alicia was trying to convince her mom that it was time to take a break from the drinking and just have some fun mingling with the family. Judging by the snarl on Lisa's face, that was not something she wanted to do. Before I could get between them, Lisa slapped Alicia across the face and stormed towards the wine cellar. Alicia stumbled back, and I saw tears in her eyes, but she took a deep breath and grabbed her Christmas cookie to munch on. Try to talk your mom into taking it easy? Alicia sniffled and wiped her eyes.
It's okay. She's just drunk. She'll apologize in the morning when she's sobered up a bit.
Yeah, and then she'll be making herself a mimosa minus the orange juice. I scanned the kitchen, hoping I'd somehow missed the giant uncle in the crowd, but no such luck. Hey, have you seen Uncle Nick? He gave me something and I just can't accept it. It's too much. Alicia blinked owlishly.
Uncle who?
Uncle Nick. You know, big guy, flannel shirt, beard. I vaguely gestured to around the height the man was. Is he one of your aunt's boyfriends or something?
Maybe? Because I don't have an Uncle Nick. I'm pretty sure I'd remember an Uncle Nick.
Yeah. The strange situation at the fireplace now had an uncomfortable twist to it. You don't think someone just snuck in pretending to be a relative? Alicia snorted.
I doubt it. What did he give you anyway?
I showed her the watch, and she nearly choked on her cookie.
Holy...
She took it from me to get a better look.
It looks real. What kind of weirdo crashed a Christmas party to give expensive gifts? No way. It can't be a crasher. Let's start looking. At the very least, we gotta give him something back.
All I have is the mini cupcake maker for the White Elephant.
Maybe he really likes cupcakes.
I rolled my eyes. but at least I had an ally in my search now. We left the large kitchen and started going through the rooms. Alicia knew this place better than I ever could. Apparently, they'd rented this place a lot as a kid, too. There had been some remodeling, but the remodeled wing was closed off, so we just went through the living areas, the game room, and even the playroom. Nothing. Zilch. I was starting to think I'd hallucinated the whole event when I bumped into Matthew and decided to ask him if he'd seen Uncle Nick.
Oh, I didn't know his name. But the big guy with the flannel? I think I saw him heading upstairs to one of the bedrooms. Hey, who's he with anyway? And you wouldn't have happened to see Diana, would you?
And I gave Matthew the worst glare I could muster. I'm not even going to dignify that with an answer, man. Did you talk with him?
Nah.
Matthew waved that off.
Like I said, I assumed he was with someone else. He looked close enough to Aunt Edwina's age and seemed to know everyone.
He trailed off as we both heard something that struck something in our hearts. Crying. A child crying. I almost dropped my mug as I followed the sound up the stairs. I was flabbergasted by the sight of little Vincent standing near the laundry room, tears rolling down his cheeks. I was used to his tantrums, which were quite dramatic affairs with kicking and screaming. And this was not that. Hey, buddy, you okay? I knelt down to his level. What's wrong, Vincent? Vincent sniffled and gingerly rubbed his back.
Uncle Nick said I was naughty and I needed punishment. I was naughty.
My blood went ice cold. As a father, my mind went to so many dark places. Uncle Nick?
Uh-huh.
Vincent lifted up his shirt and turned around. My stomach just about dropped into my shoes as I saw what was, without a doubt, 3 bright red lash marks.
He had a branch, and he hit me. It hurts, Uncle Greg.
Did he do anything else, Vincent? I was afraid of the response. Vincent turned back around and shook his head.
Just gave me 3 lashes and told me that I needed to be better to my cousins. And he asked where my mommy was because it was her fault I was being so naughty. I feel really bad, Uncle Greg. Can I apologize to Brooke? Uncle Nick was right. I was naughty. I was very naughty, and I don't want to be naughty.
You can apologize later, buddy. It's okay.
My heart hurts, Uncle Greg. I was mean to Brooke and London, and I really don't want to be bad anymore.
I scooped Vincent up as he frantically apologized. Christ, what had this freak done to get into this poor little guy's head? I wasn't someone who followed the whole corporal punishment thing for kids. But from what I remembered about my own childhood, I certainly wasn't this apologetic after a spanking. I ran into Alicia down the stairs, and she could tell how horrified I was by taking a single look at me.
What happened, Greg?
Uncle Nick hit me with the branch.
Vincent, oh, so helpfully answered. Alicia's face went white. Then it went red as she crushed the remnants of another Christmas cookie in her hand.
He did what?
Alicia, can you put Vincent to bed and find his parents? I'm gonna find Uncle Nick and personally beat him with his own branch. Alicia nodded.
Let me get a few whacks in, too.
I handed Vincent off to her. You got it. I was pissed as hell. Sure, Vincent was a shithead kid, but that was his parents' job to keep him in line. Not some random stranger claiming to be an uncle. I was going to rip him a new one. I hadn't checked one place yet, which was in the wine cellar. I didn't want to go down there, knowing Lisa was probably deep into another bottle, but it was the only place I hadn't checked for Uncle Nick. Maybe he'd been drunk too. That would explain a lot. Uncle Nick? Lisa? Is Uncle Nick down there? We need to have a talk. I just about tripped over Lisa. My mother-in-law had once again drunk enough to pass out right in the middle of the floor. An empty bottle was still clutched in her hand. I sighed and knelt down to her level. Lisa, you can't sleep down here. Time to get up. When I rolled her over, I realized what a horrible mistake I'd made. Lisa wasn't unconscious. She was dead. Her empty eyes stared up at the ceiling. Drying vomit covered her mouth and the front of her dress. Her body had already started to cool. I felt sick, too. I backed away from her body and nearly tripped again. Bottles. So many bottles. Too many bottles. Lisa was a complete alcoholic, but even she wouldn't have pounded back this many bottles, right? I counted no less than 10 before I looked back at her body. Focused on her mouth. Underneath the reddish puke, I realized her lips were bruised. So was her neck, for that matter. Like someone had grabbed her by the neck and forced her to drink. And drink and drink until this. No way. I was seeing things. I was overreacting. I was jumping to conclusions because of how fucking weird this night was. Either way, I couldn't stay down here. I could smell the puke now, and it would overwhelm me unless I got out of there. I stumbled out of the wine cellar, pushing the door shut behind me. Alicia was right there to greet me as I left.
Greg? Is Uncle Nick down there?
Call 911. He's not down there. Your mother is. She opened her mouth to probably ask what that was about when the meaning of my words sunk in. She gasped, and her hands flew up, her head shaking side to side. No, you can't. She tried to push past me, but I refused to budge. Alicia, you don't want to see her. Please believe me when I tell you, you do not want to see her. Her bottom lip quivered, but she nodded and stumbled into the kitchen, this time heading right for the bottle and pouring herself quite the large glass of wine.
Call 911. I'll get everyone together.
She gestured for the landline. Getting a cell phone signal out here was just not an option, making this situation a million times worse. I waited till Alicia cleared everyone out of the kitchen until I dialed 911 and explained that my mother-in-law was no longer with us and that we needed assistance or something out here ASAP. My heart fell when I told the operator our address, and he paused for a long second.
Sorry, where are you?
Greenbrier Lodge. When can we expect someone? There was another pause.
On the mountain? Sir, we may not be able to get up to you tonight.
What? I could feel the 911 operator cringe on the other side of the line.
Sir, there's a blizzard going on. We've had a tree fall on the only road going up to the lodge. We cannot get up to you until the tree has been moved, and at the earliest, it's looking like that won't be until morning.
And at that moment, I heard a pop, and the line went dead. Probably for the best, because I was going to start screaming if I hadn't been cut off. I tried redialing, but there wasn't even a busy tone. The line was just down. I swore before I headed into the living room. Despite the Christmas music playing and the fireplace crackling, people's mood did not match the cheery atmosphere.
We covered her body with one of the quilts.
That was Aunt Frances, who had the most dead expression on her face.
I knew Lisa'd drink herself to death one day. Didn't expect it Christmas. When will the ambulance be here?
About that, I sighed. Not till morning. The room immediately filled with outrage. Demands of why the hell they weren't coming right this second to people freaking out about what to do about the actual corpse in the wine cellar flew in my direction. Couldn't even begin to answer them. It was the quietest voice of all that got the room quiet.
Daddy, look at my dolly!
Brooke had left the playroom and was taking with her a truly impressive baby doll. One of those who cry, eat, make a mess in their diapers. Exactly the one she'd been stopping by in the toy aisle for the last 2 months whenever we were in the store. Hey, Brooke. I tried to herd her back. Where'd you get that? It's such a nice doll.
Nick!
My legs nearly gave out from under me. I tried to snatch the doll away, but Brooke just held it close to her chest, looking confused and a little scared at my frantic movement. Daddy? She asked with a quivering voice. Uncle Nick. I now scanned the room, searching for the bearded stranger that claimed to be family. Okay, once and for all, did any of you bring an older man with you named Nick? Real tall, short white beard. The room murmured among themselves, some confused, some starting to worry.
I thought he came with Winnie.
Aunt Edwina just shook her head. I shivered. Confirmation once and all. Nick was sure as hell no one's uncle. Brooke looked up curiously, too young to really understand what all the fuss was about.
Daddy, you all good?
Sorry, Pumpkin. I swallowed and put a smile on my face. Where did you see Uncle Nick?
With Uncle Matthew, upstairs.
Brooke pointed toward the general direction of the steps. I swallowed my nerves. Right. I'm gonna go find him. You go back to the playroom. If anyone wants to come up with me, I'd really appreciate it. It wasn't until I was halfway up the steps that I heard someone behind me. I turned to see Alicia.
Everyone's back to bickering about Mom's drinking habit or who really brought this Nick guy here. Happy holidays.
I sighed. I guess I couldn't have expected much more from my in-laws. Thanks for the backup. What took you so long?
I went into my purse and got my taser. This whole situation something's got me freaked out.
Alicia shivered.
Someone nobody knows shows up for Christmas, gives really nice gifts to you and to Brooke, and smacks Vincent with a branch? Seriously, what the hell?
I shrugged. We walked down the hall, with Alicia by my side, taser in her hand. This was where most of the bedrooms were. I listened carefully, wondering if I could pick out Uncle Nick's deep baritone or Matthew's chatty, nasally voice, but rather than any of those, I heard a gasping cry. I picked up pace, throwing open the door to one of the rooms and flicking the light switch. For a second, I thought I'd be seeing my second corpse of the night. A man was lying face down on the bed, dressed only in his boxers. His back was a shredded mess. It looked like someone had taken a cheese grater to his skin.
This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by Fume. Cold turkey. It's one heck of a way to break a habit, folks. If you're into other fun stuff like waterboarding, the rack being drawn and quartered, for example, cold turkey might just be the thing for you. But if you're a normal human being, there's a much better way. And no, it's not some herbal remedy or self-help nonsense. It's real, it's simple, and it involves no torture whatsoever. In fact, it's fun. It's called Fume. That's spelled F-U-M, folks. It's an award-winning flavored air device designed to make kicking that habit more tolerable. It uses no vapor. Wow. Has no electronics. Yes, and contains no harmful chemicals. Dang right. Just natural, delicious flavors. See, there's nothing wrong with keeping your hands and mouth busy. With Fume, you're free to enjoy the harmless aspects of your habit without all the harmful ones. So rather than depriving yourself altogether, you get this nifty little device to keep you busy. Put simply, bad habits are bad, but Fume is good. And it's fun to use this thing. It feels good in my hand and has this adjustable airflow dial that makes it satisfying to use. There are movable parts and magnets that are fun to fidget with. They divert me nicely, thank you very much. And it tastes great too. Fresh, natural, but full of flavor. Kind of like a refreshing herbal tea. They're nicely made, too. You gotta try the new Solano Fume. It's made with a premium walnut barrel and an onyx-coated mouthpiece that has a slightly softer finish. I could really get used to this thing, believe me, but no worries. It's a good habit. I'd trade it for a bad one any day. Start the holidays off right with the good habit by going to tryfume.com/chilling and getting the journey pack today. Fume is giving listeners of this show 10% off when they use my code CHILLING to make starting the good habit that much easier. Thanks for your support and for supporting our valuable sponsors.
It was so gruesomely ripped up. But after looking for a minute, I realized he was still breathing. Another sob, and I looked behind the door. Diana was staring out from behind it, which nearly scared me half to death. She was in a once white bathrobe. It was now streaked with red. She hiccuped, and Alicia jumped into action. She wrapped her arms around Diana and escorted her to a chair.
Jesus Christ, Diana, what happened?
I went to the man on the bed. After realizing Diana was in there too, I wasn't surprised to see it was Matthew. I almost went to turn him over, but realized that probably wasn't the best course of action with how badly his back had been ripped up. Instead, I draped a blanket over him and applied pressure to the oozing wounds, while Diana hiccuped and sobbed through her story.
Matthew and I, we decided to sneak off. We didn't think anyone would notice. We just wanted time with us. We were getting undressed when Uncle Nick barged in. He was so angry. He told us that we were being terrible people, that right now there was a discussion about what to do about Mom. Mom's dead. Is she really dead? I feel sick. When Nick tried to throw a punch, he just caught his hand and, oh my God, he just crushed it. Matthew almost screamed, but Nick just threw him to the ground and came after me. He just had this branch, a white branch, and he tried to hit me with it again and again, and telling me that on top of cuckolding my husband, who talks like that anymore. Who says cuckolding? I was a terrible mother who didn't give any guidance to my son. And you know what?
Diana's glassy eyes became clear for a moment.
He's right. I don't know why it took so long for me to see it, but he's right. I've been a terrible mother. I've been sneaking out on Paul for months now to be with Matthew. That horrible monster was right.
She burst into horrid sobs again, sounding more in pain from the guilt than the actual whipping she'd received. It was so bizarre, so crazy. I didn't even know what to say. Matthew came to after a few more moments of Diana crying. He lifted his head off the mattress.
I feel like someone's taken my heart out and stomped on it. In my back. Fuck. What did you do to my back?
It's all right, Matthew. After you're feeling all right, we'll find Uncle Nick.
Fuck, no. You need to find him now.
Matthew's eyes shot open, and he tried to get up, only to gasp and fall back on the bed.
Tracy came in the room. But before I blacked out, I saw him with Tracy.
The wardrobe doors flew open, and I nearly shit myself. There was Tracy. Perfectly fine. Obviously, she was in shock, but she looked just fine. Except she was carrying, which nearly made me laugh hysterically, a golden retriever puppy with a red bow on its neck. Matthew? Did that just happen? I scrambled to help my sister-in-law and her new puppy out of the wardrobe. What the hell were you doing in there?
Oh, it's a passage.
Tracy brushed aside some of the coats to reveal a way into the wall. To her credit, she sounded quite calm, even if her face was white as a sheet.
When we came here as kids, we found a lot of secret doors and hidden passageways. Nick told me to take a walk down one with him.
Diana looked up at Tracy, but her face contorted with grief again, and she turned away. Tracy put the puppy down and sat next to her bloodied husband. Matthew immediately started his frantic apologies, confessing to the months of affair, but Tracy barely seemed to notice him.
I came up here to get away from all the chaos downstairs, and I just walked in on Matthew getting beat half to death by that Uncle Nick guy. When he saw me, he just took me back into the passage. I'd almost forgotten about it. I just knew I hid in there to get away from... not important. We just took a long walk through there, and I wasn't scared. I'm fucking scared as shit right now, but I wasn't when Uncle Nick was walking alongside me.
Tracy must have noticed the incredulous look on my face.
I'm serious, Greg. I wasn't afraid. It felt not real. Uncle Nick knew everything. He knew about the affair Matthew was having. I knew it was happening. I didn't know it was with Diana.
She gave the bloodied woman a hard look, and Diana's sobs renewed in intensity.
But he knew. He said I was handling myself well. I needed to stand up for myself more. But he said even though I had every right to be cruel, I had chosen kindness. That's when he just handed me a puppy. I don't know how I didn't notice it, but he just handed it to me and told me to get back to the party and to have a Merry Christmas.
I cleared my throat. That might be my fault. When I thought he was part of the family, I spilled some family gossip. I'm so sorry. I really did think he was an uncle I just couldn't place. Tracy's brow furrowed.
But you don't know about Dad, do you?
Alicia jumped in before she could continue.
He doesn't because that didn't happen.
She gave Tracy a hard look. I frowned. What about your dad? Tracy nearly wavered before she mustered up the courage to put it out into the air finally.
Mom told us not to talk about it. But fuck it. That bitch is dead now. She can't stop me. Dad molested me when I was 8 years old.
I knew it. I wanted to say that I didn't, but I knew it. Instead of saying that, I got up. Where the hell is your dad? Freshly a widow or not? I would put the fear of God into that man.
Dunno.
Tracy scooped up her new puppy and nuzzled him.
Uncle Nick said he was going to deal with Dad before he left. So if you go after him, you'll probably find him too. Or whatever's left of him. Take the first right down the wardrobe passage. That's where I saw him last.
Now I understood that eerie calmness that Tracy had been putting out all this time. It was the kind of calmness you have when things are going to be just fine, even when everything around you has gone to shit. I flung myself into the wardrobe, surprised to see the passage quickly go from crawl space to full-on walkway. It was still quite narrow, so running wasn't the best choice, but I hurried down the way. I could feel Alicia hot on my heels.
Are you pissed?
That all this time you said your dad was a good person, and that's apparently a lie?
It's not what you think. We're not even sure if anything actually happened.
And that's bullshit. Alicia tried coming up with more excuses, but I stopped listening. I was not interested in them. At the moment, I didn't even want to look at my wife. The secret passage took me down. The walls cooled down until they were almost frosty. In fact, they were frosty. Ice swirled around the brick walls and my breath came out as a white fog. I could feel the goosebumps underneath my Christmas sweater, but I kept going. Maybe by then, I'd mostly accepted what had been happening wasn't right. That there was something more at play than what I knew was true. But if it hadn't by then, it was when I stepped out of the passage into the basement. Snow drifted from the wooden boards above my head. Fairy lights glowed from the walls. And in the center of the room, sitting next to a Christmas tree, was Santa Claus. Who else could it be, with a fluffy white beard and a red suit trimmed in white fur? What shocked me more than fucking Santa being in the basement was who was sitting on his knee. London. Her arm was pretty seriously bruised, and she had been crying, judging by her red eyes. But she was smiling now.
I'm not in trouble for punching Grandpa where it counts.
Santa's voice was still the same when he was just a flannel-wearing uncle.
Of course not. You didn't do a thing wrong. You were a very good girl this year, London. You were good to your little sister.
Half-sister.
Yes, your half-sister. You were kind to your friends. You listened to your mother and stepfather. Greg. Yes. I know you call him Greg. You don't need to correct me again. You've done your homework and completed your chores. Yes, London, you've been a very good girl this year.
Santa, or rather Uncle Nick, reached into a black sack next to him.
This is one half of your present. The other's upstairs next to the tree.
He presented London with the package, which she tore into with vigor. She gasped as she revealed the Barbie inside.
Ooh, Barbie. What's the other half of the present?
Well, what's a Barbie without her dream house?
London's jaw dropped.
No way.
Yes way. Now, run along and get it. Remember to share, though.
London cheered and hopped off Uncle Nick's knee. Only then did she notice me and her mother standing in the passageway entrance.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Mommy. I'm gonna go play with my new dream house.
Then she dashed out of the room. It truly was magic how this Christmas wonderland faded away. No more snow, no more trees, no more Santa Claus. It's just a normal basement storeroom. Mostly. The first thing I noticed was that with the tree gone, I could see Jerry. He was hanging from the ceiling by his wrists, and if I thought Matthew had been beaten without mercy, I was quite mistaken. He had, in fact, been merciful to Matthew. He had not to Jerry. Lacerations covered Jerry's entire body, literally head to toe, making him resemble something you'd find in a butcher's shop more than a human being. He was still alive, somehow. He moaned and twitched, pain stopping him from fighting or from falling into unconsciousness. Then I saw Uncle Nick. The real Uncle Nick, not the kindly older man I'd met upstairs or the Santa Claus I'd seen moments before. Uncle Nick's horned head only avoided touching the ceiling because he was bent down. A black, shaggy cloak hung from his shoulders, and bright yellow eyes stared back at me from his gaunt white face. His lips curled into a sneer, revealing a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth.
I decided it was best London didn't see this. Let her keep her innocence for a little longer.
His voice now had this unearthly growl tone to it. He stepped forward, and I realized those eyes hadn't been staring at me. They'd been staring at Alicia.
Unlike you, Alicia, the mother who did nothing to protect her child from the monster that this family covered up.
Alicia tried to hide behind me, but Uncle Nick simply gestured for me to move. And I did. I don't remember consciously doing so, but I found that I no longer stood between Uncle Nick and my wife. Uncle Nick's footstep was accented with a heavy clopping sound, like hooves on pavement. Alicia trembled, staring up at the beastly creature now standing above her.
I admit, I am tempted to have you face a punishment akin to the other horrid souls under this roof.
Uncle Nick tilted his head to the side before he sighed.
But I do understand that it can be so very hard to acknowledge a threat that was once your own pain. You did not consciously put London in danger, but you did all the same. So, as a reminder, Alicia, have this as your present.
Uncle Nick's cloak shifted, and his clawed hand came out, presenting a lump of black coal wrapped in a shiny bow. He plopped it into Alicia's hands and patted her on the head.
Merry Christmas.
Alicia stared blankly at the literal lump of coal in her hands for a few moments before she started to giggle. And once she started, she couldn't stop. She sunk to the floor, giggling while she cried, smiling one moment and horror cast across her features the next. Uncle Nick turned to me next and smirked.
Merry Christmas to you as well. I hope you enjoy your new watch, but you may want to turn away from this. Or perhaps you don't. I too would want to witness the suffering of the man who lured away my child with evil intent.
I didn't look away. I watched as Uncle Nick approached Jerry, lightly smacking his face to make sure he was awake. Then he grabbed the man by the legs and hauled them up. I watched as Uncle Nick's jaw seemed to unhinge, allowing it to fall open wide enough to bring it around Jerry's ankles. Then he crunched down. Jerry's blood-curdling scream had to be heard through the house, but I still watched. Uncle Nick chewed past Jerry's knees, the old man unable to do anything but shriek in agony. Blood poured down Uncle Nick's chin and soaked his black cloak, but he just continued to eat, his jaw expanding as needed to fit Jerry inside. I know it's impossible, But I swear, Jerry continued to scream until Nick had consumed him up to the neck. Only then did he finally stop eating. He wiped the gore from his lips, burped, and then grabbed the still hanging arms and scooped Jerry's head off the floor. He stuffed them into his black bag. After a final nod in my direction, he approached the coal-burning furnace in the corner. He flung open the door. Just before the family burst into the room, Uncle Nick managed to crawl inside the impossibly small space and shut the door behind him.
This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by BetterHelp. How's the holiday season treating you, folks? Are you giddy for Christmas morning or just waiting for it all to be over? Maybe you're already anxious about taking down the decorations. I get it. Believe me. With all the stress of the holidays upon us, remember that the season of giving also includes giving to yourself. It means taking a load off, giving yourself a break, and maybe getting a little therapy from our friends at BetterHelp. Therapy is the greatest gift you can give yourself, and almost anyone can benefit from it. Just visit BetterHelp.com/chilling, fill out their questionnaire, and you'll have a ready and willing therapist within 48 hours. You'll have virtual appointments weekly and can text anytime in between. It's flexible, convenient, and more affordable than you'd think. It's the self-care you need for a price that you can feel good about. That's why I love this BetterHelp. It's the same clinically proven talk therapy, but without the formal office visits that make the whole process just uncomfortable and inconvenient. Remote therapy brings accessibility to the mix. The once elusive benefit of having a therapist is now available to everyone. You've given enough this year, folks. I swear these loved ones of ours don't know how good they have it. So let's save a piece of the pie for ourselves, huh? Tell the kids they're taking down the decorations this year and get yourself a therapist. You deserve it. In the season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/chilling today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/chilling. Thank you for your support and for supporting our valuable sponsors. I hope you enjoyed Christmas with the Family, as written by Kitty Olsen and performed by Nick Goroff, Kyle Stroud, Justine Anastasia, myself Steve Taylor, Paul J. McSorley, Olivia Steele, Michelle Kane, Danielle Hewitt, and Savvy Hewitt. You can find more of author Kitty Olsen by visiting our website, www.creepypastastories.com, where you can find out more about her, as well as read more of her work. Olivia Steele is a voice actress who loves the spooky side of things. Her talent varies between gameplay, live stream archives, singing, and other voice-related things. You can also hear more of Rissa and Michelle over on the Creepy Podcast at www.creepypod.com. Our second tale of the evening is written by Kyle Harrison and is performed by Jonathan West and Danielle Hewitt. In it, we meet a man stranded at the airport, desperately trying to make it home to his family for Christmas. Now, without further ado, I present to you The Layover.
I had no one to blame but myself for being stuck at the airport on Christmas Eve. A last-minute change of scheduling had resulted in having to go across the country for a merger agreement that honestly should have been handled online. Especially because most of the things we'd wanted in the contract didn't even happen. As a result, I was going to be late getting home to my family on Christmas. The airport was flooded with people, all of which were eagerly waiting to catch the next flight and make it home to their families as well. I guess that I wasn't the only one that thought they could beat the clock, I realized, as I FaceTimed my wife and updated her on what the flight plan is.
You really are in deep shit when you get home.
She warned as I overheard an announcement about the weather. I groaned in frustration as I realized the next flight I was supposed to catch was now being held until the next day because of the winter weather. This stupid storm was supposed to push south. It looks like I will see you and the kids open presents on video call. She hung up in frustration, and I didn't even blame her. Instead, I saw others shouting and screaming in anger at the delays, realizing we would all be stuck here and miss the holidays together. It was an overwhelming and crushing blow. I went to the bathroom to cool my face and just get some peace and quiet. After I finished with my business, I stared at myself in the mirror, feeling like a failure. I wish my family could see I'm doing all of this for them, but I looked down at my hands, realizing how many excuses I was making for my behavior. Maybe they are better off without me. I'm so busy running around, I never have time for them, I said. Suddenly, around me, the lights flickered a few times, and then went off. It startled me for a moment, as I heard the sharp noise, and then the power returned. That was weird, I thought, as I washed my hands and walked out. The weird was only the start of it. As soon as I stepped out into the main waiting area for this wing of the airport, I felt a chill in the air and looked around in abject disbelief. A moment ago, when I had entered the restroom, this place had been crowded with hardly any room to sit down. Now, all of a sudden, it was empty. So empty, in fact, that I felt uneasy. As I got closer to the chairs and saw newspapers dropped and hats just dangling from seats, I had the feeling that this wasn't simply a case of all these people moving to a different area. They had vanished. I looked toward the terminals beyond where the airplanes were sitting. I had just been at those windows watching maintenance workers fuel the planes and then put up the brakes to keep them in place until tomorrow. Now the entire runway looked barren. I saw the flashing lights and the carts on the runway road, but there were no signs of life anywhere. What the hell was going on? I started to walk down the empty, wide hallway, and I even called out a few times to see if anyone would answer me. But there was nothing. The entire airport felt like a tomb. I walked about a half a mile to the next big open section, which was a terminal for southbound flights, and finally sat down, trying to see if I could use my phone. I don't know why I was surprised to find out that I had no signal. I closed the phone up and decided to keep walking. I called out again, my voice feeling almost broken from having no response at all. I kept telling myself this was a bad dream, but nothing happened to wake me up. Then I heard something. Off in the distance, it was soft and repetitive. It sounded like someone walking in heels on the smooth tile floor. At first, I felt a rush of excitement as I rushed toward the noise, entering the long walkway that connected the terminals. But there was still no one there. The sound of the heels clacked against the floor, and I stood there, looking around and trying to find the source. Is anyone there? Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. My heart began to race a little, feeling anxious. If this was another survivor of this strange phenomenon, why would they stop as they searched to find others? Wouldn't the sound of another human voice make them want to search in my direction? I took a few more steps and turned to the corner, wondering if maybe I had startled them. But there was no one there. The sound returned as I walked a little further. The stepping and clicking of the heels was purposeful, and I realized that it was coming from behind me now. But I hadn't seen anyone in that hallway. I stood there for a moment and looked back. This is no time for pranks. Please, let's just help each other. They did not reply, if there was even anyone there at all. I realized, as I kept searching and hearing the faint footsteps behind me, that I might just be losing my mind. I couldn't be sure, though, because the pace of my follower seemed deliberate. It was as if someone was watching me as I desperately searched for others. Someone or something. I went to the escalator and started toward the ground floor, the footsteps increasing in speed. It sounded like whatever was following me was now trying to chase me down. It was beginning to frighten me. As I reached the bottom of the escalator, I searched for a place to hide. A large conveyor meant for baggage was right in the midst of my path, so I rushed to it, climbing on the dormant device and running through the long strip curtains. As I reached the back room of the baggage claim, I hunkered down behind a few larger bags and listened to the approaching footsteps outside. They slowed as they neared the area where I had hidden. And even though I couldn't see anyone there, it felt like their eyes were on me. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder and almost screamed. Turning behind me, a red-headed older woman clasped her hand over my mouth and shook her head for me to be quiet. We listened as the footsteps slowly faded away, and then I caught my breath, relieved, but confused as to how she was here.
How did you find me?
I was trying to hide from whatever that thing is out there. How long have you been here? I couldn't help but notice her dress, and her nails were a little dirty, and she clearly hadn't bathed for a while.
I honestly can't remember. It feels like years. But it could be less than that, or even longer. You're the first person I've seen in God knows how long.
She reached for my face to confirm if I was real. That is impossible. I've only been searching for a few hours. Less than a few hours ago, I was upstairs waiting for my Christmas flight home.
It's always Christmas here. Has been since I got here.
She pointed toward the blizzard outside the baggage claim. I saw rows and rows of parked cars covered in snow. The roads were icy and clearly undrivable, and it occurred to me that she might not be lying about being trapped here for all this time. So it never changed it, day or night. And we can't leave. It's almost like we're trapped in a snow globe.
That's exactly how I thought of it, yes. But why are you here? I had thought I would be here alone forever.
I wish I had an answer for that one. But maybe now that we are here together, we can find a way out.
Won't work. I've tried everything. The planes are stranded. There are no other living things here. And the roads are frozen solid. It's an icy, endless hell.
She looked down at the floor. I was about to make another suggestion when off in the distance I heard what sounded like Christmas music. What is that?
Ignore it.
Then I heard the sound of children laughing, and immediately I stood up to go search. There are others here. You lied to me.
No! No, don't go!
I pushed through the conveyor strips to get a better look. The laughter was coming from somewhere to my right, so I started to walk that way. The open, empty entryway of the airport made me feel numb inside as I tried to find the kids. I knew logically that it could not really be a group of children wandering this barren building with no supervision, but I didn't want to accept what the red-headed woman had told me. I heard her following me, shouting to stop, but I simply had to see for myself. Then I turned the corner, and out of the next hallway, I saw a small group of children. They were all huddled together and moving as a single unit, playing and flailing their arms joyfully as they seemed to glide across the tile. I stopped as I came into their line of sight, and I couldn't help but notice that they seemed to be moving unnaturally. I couldn't really describe it that well, but I knew that it seemed that they were almost stilted in their gait. Then they stopped, turned their heads toward me, and I felt a chill down my spine. Again. They had no eyes, no mouth, but they were starting to scream at me. Something from the middle of the crowd rose up. At first it looked like a lump of mangled hair. Then I saw glowing green eyes and pale skin. It was like a shriveled elf, except clearly tall and lanky. As it moved, I saw spidery tendrils pushing out of its body, the waves of children grasping onto the appendages as they began to rise and crawl toward me. Behind me, the red-headed woman grabbed my arm and told me to run. I stood a moment longer, transfixed by this abomination, and then raced toward the escalator.
It can't climb! Up! Up!
I moved up the stairs as fast as I could as I heard the strange laughter of the misshapen creature grow closer. I did not dare to look back until we were at the top of the escalator. The spidery amalgamation of flesh and hair hissed and giggled as it circled the bottom of the steps, trying to move up the sliding stairs, to no avail. Its eyes twinkled like Christmas lights, and I was momentarily hypnotized by it until my rescuer tugged for me to move down the terminal. Once we were far enough away that I couldn't hear its laughter, I told her thanks and asked what that beast was.
You think I know? It roams the bottom floor. I was only down there in baggage claim to gather supplies. Clothing and bedding. Then I moved up here to the food courts to scavenge for anything that might still be left.
We moved to an open-air restaurant. A soft, static-filled Christmas melody played over the intercom as we sat down, and she offered me half a sandwich.
What's your name anyway?
Samuel. You can call me Sam.
Tess. So, where were you headed when all this happened?
Home. Christmas dinner with the family and in-laws. But I'm guessing that won't be happening anytime soon. I bit into the food. It tasted almost bitter. Like it was fake. If time never moves forward, why are we still hungry and tired? I was trying to make sense of this chaotic place.
The rules don't apply. Except when they do. It's like magic. And yet, we can still be hurt. We can still die.
She looked down at the floor. I thought about that strange creature, realizing why she had so vehemently warned me to stay away. You weren't always alone.
My daughter.
she said with a nod. I saw tears swelling into her eyes.
The worst part is every time I hear that damn thing, I hear her laughter. It's hunting me, trying to lure me out.
That's awful. Why is this happening to us? Why on Christmas? She finished her meal and wiped her mouth, focusing on me before commenting.
I have a theory, but it's not a tested one. It's dangerous.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean.
There's a statue. An observatory near the 3rd floor terminals. It wasn't there whenever I first came to the airport. In the real world, I mean. I think the statue might have something to do with why we're trapped here.
I stood up, almost feeling re-energized by that thought. Well, what are we waiting for? We need to go find it.
Like I said, it's dangerous. That fleshy spider isn't the only threat around here. You remember the footsteps?
I nodded, not daring to ask their source.
There's something else above us. Animals of some kind. I never got too close, because the smell is strong of death, and blood covers the steps to the elevator. I get the feeling the creatures up there are protecting the statue.
That's all the more reason to go up there, then. I tried to think back to the parts of the airport I had already explored. When I first heard those footsteps, I was close to an emergency fire exit. There might be stairs that lead up to that part of the observatory. I started to leave the cafe. We might be able to get out of here. Tess seemed reluctant to follow. Perhaps she had grown so accustomed to being trapped here that she didn't even want to consider leaving. After losing her daughter, I couldn't blame her for wanting to avoid the grief the real world had waiting for her. As long as she's here, her daughter is still alive in some bizarre way, I thought to myself. I extended a hand to her. I won't leave without you. Staying here will only get you killed, or wind up a part of this madness. We can still get home for Christmas. I could see a spark of hope in her eyes when I told her those words, and she silently rose to her feet.
We will need supplies. And I don't mean just food.
We spent the next hour around the restaurant finding whatever we could for protection. There were heavy jackets at a nearby shop, and some duct tape we could put on our arms. Also, we broke apart a few of the chairs to use them as shields, and found an old turnstile rod to use to defend ourselves against whatever might lurk above. It wasn't much, but it was the best we could do under the circumstances. Together, we made our way back to the terminal where all of this began. It was empty as ever, but it felt even more nightmarish. I stared at the runways and the endless blizzard. Maybe we were being punished. I didn't know Tess's full story, but it was clear she had put something else first, besides being home for the holidays. Was this strange world a consequence of our actions? Were we doomed to wander this airport forever because we hadn't been trying to put family first? I swore if that was true, I would do everything in my power to make a correction in my life. All I want now is to get back to them, I thought as I spotted the fire exit. This is it. I pressed it open. Unexpectedly, a loud alarm blared and startled us both. That shouldn't even be active. We hurried into the emergency stairs. I could then hear the steps again, faster this time and close by. Tess flinched and then urged me to run. I pulled her up as we heard the door pry open and the strange invisible creature got louder, trying to catch up to us. I saw the next exit and ran out to the next floor. Quick, block the door! I urged her to hold it tight and pass her the rod. The invisible beast banged on the door as I struggled to hold it close. I could feel it clawing at the metal and heard the faint whispers of screams. It was never really there, but its presence was overwhelming. Tess hurried to lock the rod against the exit, and we made sure the makeshift blockade held good before sighing in relief. After realizing that there was no other way to reach us, we heard the footsteps recede back down the stairs. This finally gave us a chance to look around the observatory. I immediately spotted the statue. It was near the center of the entire arena. A massive bronze carving of Santa Claus himself. You weren't kidding when you said this wasn't here before. How bizarre. We walked toward it.
Be careful, Sam. There's other threats. Don't forget.
Her eyes darted about the open observatory. I reached the statue's feet and tried to read the inscription near the floor. It was old and faded. Made me wonder how long this strange, endless trap even had existed. How many people had wound up here over time? How do you think we should destroy it? I tried to see if I could move it. It was extremely heavy, so it was quickly clear that wouldn't be an option. Tess walked around it, trying to see if there were any weak spots. The entire thing probably weighed 100 tons or more. It would take a wrecking ball to make it move, I realized. As we kept examining it, I realized we were being watched. From across the observatory, I saw strange, shadowy wisps fluttering among the tables. Their eyes looked like ghosts, and bodies reminded me of a firefly. But I was certain they were trying to decide if we were a threat. Again, the room began to have a creepy, slow orchestral Christmas music play as we tried to move the statue together. But it didn't budge.
We'll have to trick one of those beasties to get over here and smash the damn thing.
I looked at her like she was crazy. Are you suggesting we act as live bait? Those things are probably faster than a cheetah. It was a ridiculous plan, especially because we didn't even know if it would work. We need to slow down and think about this. How can we be sure that this will even accomplish what we want? Tess gave me an ugly glare as the shadow wisps started to saunter toward us.
You're the one that wanted to come up here. Don't chicken out now.
I shook away my fear and focused on the statue, realizing she was right. This wasn't the time to second-guess myself. One way or another, we put an end to this nightmare, I guess. I decided to make the move toward the creatures. The long, trailing, dark creatures were close enough now I could see their bodies better, and I realized they sort of resembled reindeer covered in ash. Another holiday motif turned to a creature of this dark place, I thought, as it tilted its head toward me and bellowed. You want a piece of me? Then come on! It huffed and started to charge, and I raced toward where Tess was standing. 2 other wisps circled around the other way. I immediately noticed they were doing their best to keep their distance from the statue. Maybe that meant Tess was right, and the strange bronze Santa was our ticket out of here. But if we couldn't convince them we were threatening their idol, I wasn't sure they would make their move, I thought, as I pushed past the court back to the emergency exit. My only option was to grab the rod I had used to block the door. Then I had to run back to the central statue and started to bang against the statue using the rod. Tess used our makeshift shields to try and protect me as the wisps reacted. When I started banging against their precious statue, they lashed out and started slashing and growling madly. Get ready! One of them hunkered down, ready to pounce. It shrieked, and I pushed her to the ground as it slammed against the statue. The massive Santa sculpture wobbled for a moment, and then toppled over the edge toward the next floor. We turned to watch it. It felt like it was happening in slow motion. The statue turned end over end as it neared the bottom floor of the airport. Tess grabbed my hand and made me look at her.
If this doesn't work, thank you for at least trying.
The statue slammed against the floor and began to shatter in every direction. As it burst open, a blazing light shimmered up toward us and circled around the airport terminal. I turned to look at her, my face covered in the blinding illumination. "I won't forget you!" I covered my eyes as the light came swirling about, and then the noise of the airport returned. I opened my eyes again and looked around, finding myself completely surrounded by people again. Above my head, it displayed my flight was no longer delayed, and I raced to my terminal, my heart not wanting to believe I had made it back. But I had. I stood in line with my luggage, and I had my passport ready. I checked my phone and called my wife, tears streaming down my face as I told her I would be home in time for Christmas. It's a Christmas miracle. I scanned the crowd for any sign of Tess or her daughter. I wondered if she was still trapped in that hellscape, too. Then a familiar redhead popped up from the crowd, and I told my wife I had to get off the phone. I went over to smile and cheer her for returning home, but as I approached, I saw a look of confusion on her face.
Do we know each other?
I saw her daughter by her side, coloring, and I sheepishly said, "Sorry, you reminded me of a friend. On your way home for Christmas?" She nodded with a smile, and Tess said,
Our flight is delayed. Looks like a long layover. What about you?
I couldn't help but to wonder if this version of Tess had not gone to the frozen airport yet. Might I be able to change her story? Just got the news. My plans are on schedule. Keep an eye on your daughter. She's very precious. Don't let her out of your sight, okay? She smiled, and then they called me to come to the gate. I grabbed my bags and turned back to say goodbye, but she had vanished from sight. Or perhaps disappeared from the airport entirely. Perhaps her layover had begun just like mine. Stay strong, my friend. We will make it home. I stepped through the gate and got on my way.
I hope you enjoyed The Layover, as written by Kyle Harrison and performed by Jonathan West and Danielle Hewitt. You can find more of author Kyle Harrison by visiting our website, www.creepypastastories.com, where you could find out more about him as well as read more of his work. You can hear more of Danielle Hewitt over on the Creepy Podcast at www.creepypod.com. Now, before we go, folks, I wanted to check back in with the other half of that special announcement I mentioned earlier. 2024 is bringing some restructuring changes, and one of those is giving you twice the chilling tales for Dark Knight's Terror per week. That's right. Along with our Monday episodes, we will now feature the show on Wednesdays as well. And with a new night comes a new voice. Paul J. McSorley, host of our beloved Fear from the Heartland, will be guiding you on Wednesdays into the frightening depictions of your darkest dreams. But don't you worry, I'll still be here each and every Monday. Well, friends, our weekly descent into the depths has just about come to a close. But before we go, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us for tonight, and remind you to take a moment to stop by our iTunes page and leave Chilling Tales for Dark Nights a 5-star review and a kind word, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you haven't already. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can find an archive of our work going back to 2012. And consider signing up as a patron at our website, chillingtalesfordarknights.com, to show your support and get all of our content ad-free. I'm your host of the evening, Steve Taylor, and it's been a pleasure. Tune in again next week when we once again turn off the lights and turn on the dark. See you next Monday. Sweet dreams, listener. Sweet dreams.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.